Hi everyone, I'm Ro. This is my room that I created for Blood on the Clocktower. Uh, I made it essentially so that I could host Blood on the Clocktower games here in Rec Room. Um, but one thing you should know about this room right up front is that this room does not have any way in which you can just play the game wholly contained in this room. It doesn't have any of the character tokens or like a way to deal them out or anything like that or character tracking within this room. So you do need to have a real world method of handling the actual game components. When I host games in this room, I have my real world Grim on a table in front of me with all the tokens so I can keep track of all the game information. It is also pretty important that you do know how to run a game of Blood on the Clocktower in order to use this room, um, and that you do have a method to track stuff. Even experienced storytellers might think, oh, I can just keep all the information in my head. But chances are you won't. You would probably screw something up, and then that would ruin the experience for your players. So please make sure you do know how to run a game of Blood on the Clocktower. This is obviously for specifically the Trouble Brewing game script, um, and that you do have some method of actually tracking all the character data that'll happen throughout a game. And now some important things about this room. So these, I'm going to be switching between two views here, myself and this other alt that I have here, Ribbon, mainly to show a couple things. But so yeah, I want to explain a few things about this room. So probably on my view now. So you'll see behind me the most important thing in this room. Here, I'll give you actually a good view of the entire room. So you'll see that there are 15 seats. So this room can accommodate up to 15 players plus one for the storyteller. I have not actually played a full game. I've had, I think, at most maybe 8 to 10 people in here. So I have no idea if a full game will work, if the room can actually handle that many players. I would think it could, but uh, I guess I'll find out once this actually gets published. um, yeah, you'll see a few things around this room that are important. So the seats, the players will come in and click claim on them. You will see that these two have been claimed by my alts here. Um, I apologize right now for all the ums and uhs and things like that. Just can't help it. But it's important that this video be made so that storytellers understand how this room works. So when a player claims a seat, they get their name in front of their display name in front of them, which is important for everyone to be able to, know who's who. They also get a seat number 1 through 15, and that's important for not only for this podium here, but for the storyteller's podium here, which I will go over in a little bit. So yeah, they claim a seat. Once they've claimed a seat, only that player can sit in a seat. The seat will kick out anybody else that tries to sit in it, and that's because the seat needs to be designated to that player for these buttons. And then that player can also not claim another seat. So if a player wanted to switch seats for any reason, they would. I have these two buttons here, which are kind of for essentially for like debugging some of the issues that this room can have. Essentially, this is the most important button. When stuff goes wrong, it'll just clear any roles and tags as it says. So like this player would get cleared of seat 3. You as the storyteller would have to go in on your end and manually clear the actual seat, I think, as well. I forget if that's actually how it works. But either way, things just need to be cleared out, and then the player can claim a different seat. Players shouldn't hopefully need to change seats often. But anyway, so that's how the seats work. And once you have all your players seated, then once they're all seated, then you'll want to actually hit the display base player count button, which will on the front here. I can hit it now. It won't show a good number because hopefully that clicked. Oh, I have my HUD off. Okay, next important thing. If you are going to be the storyteller, a lot of these buttons won't work until you click Become Storyteller. Only one player can be the storyteller at a given time, and only they have access to these storyteller buttons. So let me become storyteller. So now if I click this button, this is where it would display who the storyteller is and the base count for townsfolk, outsiders, minions, and obviously the one demon. So this actually is accurate. It does put the accurate count based on seats being claimed and filled up. So that's where that will appear. You'll see the major clock tower behind with all the roles listed on it. Now, depending on what platform your players are playing on, this may or may not be legible, especially those upper parts. I know on certain devices they can be pretty fuzzy up there and hard to read. I can read it fine here. I'm hoping it can capture in the recording that I'm on my PC at least. I can read all this perfectly fine. Um, and I've used pretty much all of the exact terminology as it appears in the real game. I've changed a few things. For instance, added some extra, like for here for the chef. The chef was confusing to players based on how it's actually worded. So I wanted to make it clear that this is about seated players and that the seats wrap, um, and also that this wraps around. There's also over here, I changed the wording on the imp because of some filters that Rec Room uses. Couldn't actually use the actual wording. Um, Also, originally when I was testing this game, for friends who are sensitive to certain words, I had actually changed some of the wording, but I've reverted all the text-based wording back to its actual game, like its real world, you know, match. But when the only place it'll show up, I think, is in one of the hollow intros, which real quick I'll show. These are important for especially for new players. When you have your new players seated, you can first and foremost you can play the Blood on the Clock Tower intro, which is me reading the a hollow of me reading off the actual intro on the page. I In that intro, I've changed the word demon to monster. I think that might be the only place now where any words have been changed, and obviously it doesn't matter for the rest of the game. This also has the house rules, which I'll go over. They're on a signpost behind me. It has how nominations work, and the other details about the room, which I'm just explaining to you now, and you can explain to your players, or you can use these hollows. Although I definitely recommend the intro, at least for the first couple games, probably because it'll give you a 3-minute window in which to set up a game. These are all on the sounds channel, audio channel. So if you want to, you can tell your players to go into their audio and turn up their sounds. Um, this will, of course, they can lower or increase their sounds. This will, of course, make footsteps more audible, but you can also tell them to turn down their sounds after, whatever. The footsteps being audible has not seemed to be a problem in this room, but I figure that a lot of players automatically kind of maybe have music turned down and voices set to what they want the voices to be set to, and I didn't know if I felt like sounds was the best channel to put them on. Anyway, going back over this, all the characters are listed here in the order they are on the script. You can tell your players about the roles if you want to, and these are just here as a reference during the game. And then players can also, for anyone having trouble reading those, can go over to either side of the room. There are these character posts. There's one on the opposite side as well. And clicking any of these buttons will give you the exact thing it says on the sign there. So anyone who clicks it, like a player who clicks this, them and only them will, they and only they, whatever, they'll be the only ones who get the pop-up. And if they are stupid and click all the buttons for some silly reason, they are going to have to sit through all those pop-ups because there's no way to just cut them off, I'm pretty sure. Like if I click chef and then investigator, yeah, it's going to have to go one at the other. So that's something your players ought to be aware of if they decide to goof around with them. So that's how those work. This is how players can get all the character information if they need it. Uh, I'm going to go over, oh, and then behind here they have the night order, the first night, this is the order things happen in, and then other nights, this is the order things happen. Slight change here. Oh, I guess I should mention this is an important change. This is the most important change I made. If you hear squeaking, that's my keyboard sliding around, sorry. The spy. The spy was not going to be actually very viable within Rec Room because there's no Grim in this room, and there's no way to show a spy a Grim. So what I ended up doing was I made some changes. The spy in this version is basically able to see everything that happens at night, and they get access to all text messages passed between the storyteller and the players, and you'll see that happen. I'll show you that in a moment. Also, because in the real game, the spy technically could be poisoned, but I don't want you as a storyteller to have to deal with assigning and unassigning a spy, which would be cumbersome in here. So I just, for this, the spy is just immune to poison. It's very rare a spy would, like a poisoner would want to poison a spy. I think they would do it just for like, goofs. So it's best just to make the spy immune to poison. Um, and that's really the only role that has been changed. Every other role would work as it normally does. And now let's talk about, let's see, oh, the house rules. House rules are pretty important, and this is something you can use the Hollow for or go over with your players. There's also a few things on here that are, a few things that are not actually on here. So first of all, I tell my players that a microphone is required. This is a talking game. They should have a microphone on and not use text-based messaging. Down here, you also see no text messaging. The reason being, if a player is using text messaging in Rec Room, they can easily just secretly message anybody, and then it kind of, I think a part of Blood on Clocktower is knowing who's talking to who and when, and possibly even eavesdropping on them. So text messaging can bypass that, and that makes the game no fun. So essentially, I tell players they need a mic. They need it set to push to talk to prevent a lot of background noise. Players who have loud backgrounds or are prone to just random noises and outbursts. I think push to talk just makes it a fair and level communication field for everyone. But if you trust your players to be more calm and respectful about that, you don't necessarily need to enforce that. But I do think a mic should be required. And then I also think players should avoid watch use at all during the game. Maybe turn off notifications because players can be easily distracted by their watch, not be paying attention to stuff, cause delays in games. And again, it also allows them to just potentially bypass like the public facing aspect of this game. So these top four I really emphasize with my players. And then the other two are actually circuit restricted. But I don't know actually because when I built this room, I built it in VR, and I did not really experiment a lot with screen mode stuff. And I noticed now that I've noticed that there are options within screen mode that I don't know if they can get around this stuff. But there's a circuits that if a screen mode player attempts to go into third person view or attempts to pull out their camera, I don't remember if it's any point or if it's only during what would be considered the sleep phase, which I'll explain in a moment. But either way, if they do that, what happens is they get, let me see if I can do it with this one real quick. This alt. So if this alt takes out its camera, okay, yeah, it happened. So what happened was Thistlein got warped behind here pretty much immediately when taking out their camera, and their name would have turned red if it wasn't red. The name kind of stays red until it's cleared through the clear roll and tag buttons. But anyway, they do still have their camera out, which I don't think. I don't remember if the camera gets put away when it's at nighttime or if that's a thing. But if they get warped behind there, they've tried to take their camera out. You should make sure to tell them, or they've gone to third person, remind them no cameras, no third person, and to put it away. Let me set this character back down. Okay. And then the reason being, once the sleep mode happens, those two things allow breaking of what is supposed to be a visual block. I don't like having to ask Rec Room players to close their real world eyes. That could be, problematic if they forget or accidentally, take a peek or purposely take a peek. So I use a blocking prop that third person and cameras can effectively get around. So that's why those are there, and that's why those circuits will kick them behind there if they try to use those. And finally, there's avoid excess leaning on here. I put no peaks for feet because I think you can only do this in VR. I forget. I don't have easy method to do this with my two screen mode alts here, but when the blockers are on, and this will all make sense in a moment, I'm trying to do things in a somewhat systematic order of explanation. But anyway, when the blockers are on, there is actually, let me just put them on so you can see. So these are the blockers. They're just big, like bucket-like things that go on the head. And I actually will flip to Riven's view real quick so you can see what it looks like. And I try to design them so that even if a player somehow does go idle, like Riven is right now, that they still can't see through the idle animation. But switching back to my view, you can tell that how do you duck on screen mode? Um, that's not it. Nope, that's not it. There we go. Okay, so the bottoms of these are technically open. And so if a VR player leans hard enough, they might be able to peek and see the feet of a player next to them, which would indicate during the night phase they can use that to try to see who's out of their seat and potentially having to do a nighttime action. So that's why I just say don't let people lean. If you see someone lean, I mean, they'd have to be leaning hard, so you would kind of see it as a storyteller. So again, try to control your players. Hopefully your players are here to play the game fairly and have a good time and not do cheats to try to win. Most people who play Blood on Clocktower, I find, actually want to play the game properly. Uh, so those are these, and then reset all sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. I'm going to go over some of the bugs that this room has in a moment, but that's supposed to be after the end of a game to reset everything, the players and seats, and allow a new game to start, but sometimes it doesn't work. So now how do you, so once you've let me explain the candles, although I'll explain that as I'm going over stuff. So anyway, those are the house rules. Other house rules have to do with bugs in terms of don't let players tell players don't spawn objects, especially in what are called the whisper zones, and I'll explain those in a moment. But spawning objects in whisper zones have caused them to bug in my experience, so I tell players don't spawn objects. And voting, this isn't really a house rule, but for voting, and my hollow doesn't say this because I didn't think about it until after. The hollow just explains about how real voting works with raising your hand and you as a storyteller going around looking for hands. But that can be troublesome for players, especially like just making sure their hand is clearly raised, or things like that, and you being able to tell when a hand is clearly raised. So I'd actually would prompt players to stand when they want to vote. So if Riven wanted to, or Thistlein wanted to vote for whoever, they should stand up out of their seat. That is very clear to everybody that this person is now voting. And you will definitely tell if a person's standing when you come around to them. Obviously, the blinders aren't on when voting, so shouldn't be any problems there. And then they can just sit back down. I think that's a better way to handle voting. Now, let's actually talk about how you actually, once you've given out roles, what actually happens. So you need to give everyone information about their roles, right? That's where all these buttons come in. These are your storyteller buttons. They correspond to the seats. So let's go ahead and click on Riven Seat. And this will be your main menu. So there's a few options here. Shroud is to put on or take off a bucket off of that individual person's head. So I can shroud just Riven there. Obviously, you would use this specifically for waking and putting back to sleep players during the night, so they can do their night actions. These candles are, you can knock them all over and they'll respawn if people aren't around them. I thought it was just something fun to have on here as a little playful thing. But those candles are not. They are not what actually for anyone who's played Blood on Clocktower with candles as the kind of the town square indicator of who's alive, who's a ghost. I used these because I didn't want candles that could be knocked over and knocked around. So anyway, so then that's where the candles come important. So you have the shroud, you have candles. When you're setting up the game, you're basically, once everyone's seated and you've handed out the tokens, or not handed out tokens, you've dealt your own tokens, you have the game ready to go, then you kind of want to start setting things up. So you want to put candles in front of every player, red candle to indicate, this player is alive. And then during the game, when a player does get killed or eliminated, you would switch that candle to white. This is a very clean visual indicator for anybody else around the circle, mostly clean, but most people seem to be able to tell. And then those stay there throughout the game, so a person can easily walk around during the discussion phase and see who's alive and who's a ghost. And then if a ghost uses their ghost vote, you can just completely take away their candle. And so people know, hey, that player's still in the game, but they don't have a candle, so they've been eliminated. And then these just get pulled off of here visually and get put out there and just get popped back when replaced. And this is also when you're putting out your candles, and this is what I suggest you do. Sorry, I thought I had the stuff turned off. Anyway, once you've set out your candles, or once you've got your roles figured out and are ready to starting the game, ready to start the game, you're going to one by one set out your candles. And during the candle setting time is when you're going to assign the spy role if there is a spy in the game. So if Riven actually was given the spy role, you would scroll down. So there's all this candle stuff up here, but then below is assign spy and remove spy. So essentially, to start a game, you're going to assign the spy, which is going to give them the red candle. Riven is now the spy. They will have seen that text message. I could have flipped real quick between the camera angles. And then, so they'll know that they're the spy. And then when and if they get eliminated, you click this, gives them one more text message, and now they no longer have the spy ability because they were eliminated. Um, Let me remove that again, remove that candle. Okay, good. And reassign the spy because I want to be able to show you how that works once we get going here. So Riven, once again, is a spy. Um, and the way the spy works is once it's nighttime, you will see, well, Riven is idle. Hopefully your players won't go idle. But the idle Riven is able to see through. That's ridiculous. But you get a good look at what the inside of that bucket looks like. I put a face blocker as well as the outer bucket so that players can't kind of like lean through and see outside. Um, but Riven, from their view, cannot see or it can't see everything. They don't have an actual bucket on their head. It's just a like fake prop. So everyone else thinks that they're just a normal person, but they can see everything. And then, additionally, they will get all the messages. So after you've passed out all of the candles, then you're gonna go again around again one at a time and start messaging everybody. Whatever you want to message anybody in this game. So originally I had a huge menu of all like the pre like built messages of like you are this role or empath information or fortune teller information or just other things like commands like telling the imp go select someone to kill. Like I had all these pre-built things. However, the way the system works, so let me just you are the spy. So Riven and I both see the message, you are the spy. Um, the way the menu works is the more layers that I've put in here, the more likely it was to bug out. And when it bugs out, and it can even bug out at just this simple level, when it bugs out, I find it's just best to like just kind of keep tabbing things open and closed until it pops back up. Um, so that may happen no matter what you're doing, in which case just kind of keep closing and opening, tabbing, or using your watch or whatever you're doing to. I do find that it's easier to run the games on screen mode if you can try to run them on VR, but typing can be a pain. And then you're constantly, again, if you're using a real world component to track things, it's going to be a bit of a pain to see things. But yeah, so you're messaging your players through here, and anything you need to message them. So like if they were the empath, and I needed to say like both or what is it? I forget how empath reads, but it's empath's just a number, right? So let's just say two. Um, and yeah, so that is how that will work. You'll be messaging players individually and so early game, especially if you have a large room, it's going to take a while to go through and tell everybody their role. But alternatively, what you could do if you did not want to give out roles this way, you can use what are called the whisper zones. And what those are these big pink squares in the four corners of the room. And the way those work is that there's no easy way for me to actually demonstrate this because Riven's viewpoint is not recording any audio. All the audio is just coming from my own. But if I were to be in here with another player and talking, only players within the zone would be able to hear. There's a little bit of a buffer here, so as players outside the zone start encroaching. I think it's roughly right about when they get towards the edge of that buffer, they'll start slightly hearing, and then obviously when they're in the buffer, they'll most likely be able to hear, and as they get in, they'll be able to hear. So this is a good way to have for players to have private conversations, and it's also a way you could potentially give out everyone's roles if you have a large group. You could say, "Hey, everybody, just line up. I'm gonna stand in here one at a time." Maybe have people line up like beyond this pole just to make sure, and then just go one at a time. Come in here. I'll tell you your role, and then exit over there. Wait till the player gets around the clock tower. Bring the next person in. Tell them their role. It might be a cleaner way. Also, a way to answer questions if anybody has any questions. But either way, those are how you would hand out the roles, how you would assign the spy, how you deal with the candles, all that stuff you need to know. And then the other thing to show you with the spy real quick is I will switch to Riven's viewpoint as I give Thistlein their role. So this message is going to Thistlein, but Riven will see it. You will see it in Riven's viewpoint right now. And so that is how the spy gets that information. And then also, when you need to have players select players, so I'm going to unshroud Thistlein because I have easy access to this player. And then when players have to do something, so I just said Thistlein's the fortune teller, I might have messaged Thistlein and said select 2 players as the fortune teller. I do recommend that you make this a house rule as well to enforce that players come to this middle podium and use that to select players. The reason for this is that it makes it very clear to you and them and potentially the spy who they are selecting. So right now the only one Thistlein can select is Riven just because of I don't think any other button will work. Yeah, so other buttons won't work because there's no player seated there. But if one of the selections was Riven, all 3 players, the Storyteller, Thistlein who's pushing this button, and Riven will see this message because Riven is the spy. So that's just a very clear way to see what was selected or who was selected. And then it's also an easy way for if there was ever a mistake in selection, because like having players point around a circle, especially from their seats, is just difficult and hard to really understand. You're going to be running around trying to figure out who they're pointing at and sending them messages. Was this who you're pointing at? So having them come here, select who they want to select, and then sitting down after they're finish their selections, you'll know the last selection they picked before they sat down was definitely the selection they wanted because they will have also seen the message. So, yeah, that is everything you need to know for how to actually run the game in this room. The only things that I haven't talked about are really the bugs. So, I mean, I did talk about the bug with the reset all. Sometimes, especially if a player drops, so make sure when a player sits back down, you reshroud them this way. Make sure to only use this button for all wake and all sleep. And then if a player accidentally disconnects or drops and then comes back, sometimes their seat will be broken. They won't be, even though their name will be on it, they won't be able to sit down. So you'll have to have them, and this can be an issue if they're the spy, but you'll basically have to have them come over, clear their roll and tags. You'll have to clear the seat. You'll have to, if they were the spy, you might have to make sure to unassign them once they've I don't even know if that'll work. The spy, I've never had it actually bug in this way, so I don't know what the outcome would be if the spy were to disconnect. But essentially, if it's just a regular player, they just have to, clear everything, reclaim a seat, sit back down, and then they're fine. You can re-put their candle if you need to or anything like that. So that can be an issue with players dropping, and then the reset all can bug out. I think it has to do with players leaving the room before you get a chance to reset all. But if I reset all now, so you see they don't have their seats claimed anymore. Their names are both white. So the seats fully reset. The candles got put back. Their status got reset. I don't think Riven would even be the spy anymore. If I click this, nothing will happen because it actually resets you as a storyteller too. So it resets actually everything. I don't think Riven will. Okay, yeah, I can't message because there's no one in that seat. Okay, so Does that is that true? Like, oh, okay, yeah, it does pop up for every seat. Okay. Um, so that's the reset all. It does work. I think if players leave the room or other things can potentially cause it to screw up. Obviously, you just have to kind of work around small bugs like that. The I mentioned about if a player I've had a player spawn a consumable in this whisper zone, and then two players went in there to talk, and before we knew it, the entire room could hear them because somehow it spawning that consumable broke the circuitry for the whisper zone. No idea how, but it was something that was funny. Could have been game breaking, but luckily wasn't. Uh, I forget if we fixed it or we just stopped using it. There was a thing where a player, oh no, there was a separate bug where a player left the whisper zone and continued to not be audible, I think, and we had them run around the room until they somehow tripped the circuitry to make their voice audible again. So there can be some odd things with the whisper zones because the way they work is when you go in here, you get voice restricted to a very short distance. When you leave, you go back up to whatever the default distance rec room is. So there's some potential for just things misfiring there. I'm gonna show you the storyteller has flight, so you can actually look around this room. You can see that there's not much to it, just this. Oh, if you fly underneath, you'll see this is where I've hidden the bucket hats. These over here, that's the spy, and these were just old designs that didn't actually work properly. I just left them there as reference, I guess. But when a player, these are all numerically assigned for seat, and then the spy gets this one. Over here, this is if the player were to check their roller text, should show them what seat they are, if they're a player, or the storyteller if you're the storyteller. And then I think this one might be for the spy. And then I just move these buttons down out of the way because they weren't really important. Players can do that stuff through other means. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers everything that you need to know for this room. So yeah, thanks for watching this video. I hope I've helped explain how this room works and how you can run hopefully fun and entertaining games of Blood on the Clocktower in here for your friends in Rec Room, and hopefully they won't fall asleep like my two alts over there. Keep your players engaged, obviously, and yeah, good luck and enjoy.